Live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts right now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are up and at 'em live in Las Vegas on a spectacular Saturday. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening. We're live on every social media platform known to man: iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram. Those are where you can like, follow, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to keep you up to date on all the latest shows here. Alex Clancy, who is locked in on the Cardinals, he's joining me here in just about a few minutes. We got so much to talk about. Championship weekend with my favorite segment of all, Jake's Prime Predictions for the championship weekend. I can't wait to give out my picks. I think it's going to be fantastic. We got four of the best teams left, all of them who are offensive-minded. I think it's going to be interesting. We're talking about ones with great defenses and ones that got really good superior offenses and great quarterbacks. So we'll be getting down to the nitty-gritty from there. So I do want to start with this here just for a couple minutes before we bring up Alex Clancy. So interesting news that's been happening in New York news media. So just recently, the New York Jets had ended up firing their offensive coordinator, Mike LaFleur. He's now a part of the LA Rams with Sean McVay. Why would McVay make this move? Well, it's very obvious and it's very simple. He loves offense. He loves offensive-minded guys. Plus, you're going in from an upgrade of, instead of dealing with Mike White, Joe Flacco, and Zach Wilson, now you're dealing with Matt Stafford next year. And hopefully they'll get this offense right. There's going to be a bunch of different changes for the Rams. I'm hoping that at some point the Rams are going to make very interesting moves within the NFC West, because I think part of that, you got to make a move with Jalen Ramsey. You got to get some first rounders in there. I think it's time that they got to refresh, get some young bloods in there, and hopefully that the Rams, they can reload, refresh, and be back to being a competitive team. But with that said, the Jets, after moving on from Mike LaFleur, because the problem was they had only scored in the red zone 5 times this season. And then out the door he goes. The red zone was awful for the Jets, even though they've got a really good young pedigree of players, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, several others in this offense that I think are going to be fantastic by next season. But the question remains, who's starting at quarterback? Because you know that they're not going to be trusting Zach Wilson that much after what we've seen with some of the comments and how he plays within the pocket. It's not going to be that easy to earn that locker room. Everybody's already made up their mind. And now the Jets ended up hiring former offensive coordinator and head coach Nathaniel Hackett. So he's coming in as an offensive coordinator. People are like, why would Nathaniel Hackett be hired by the Jets after a disastrous season in Denver? Well, you could be a great coordinator and still be a terrible head coach. It happens in this league. It's the head coaching position is not always for everybody. If you're creative, if you're the one that basically you're fantastic at in-game situation instincts, and you're able to just move around a bunch of pieces and find ways to win games, you'd be a fantastic head coach in this league. We watch Andy Reid. We watched at times Bill Belichick. We watched Mike Tomlin, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan. We watched several of these coaches. Nathaniel Hackett, as we know, being an offensive coordinator, I don't know if he put a lot of impact as far as what he did in Green Bay, or this was mostly Aaron Rodgers. But everybody's like, is that the signal that's going to make Aaron Rodgers go to the Jets? To be honest, I don't really know if that's going to be a fit. You're talking New York media. You're talking about, there's a high expectation with the Jets. And again, now you're going to get players that are going to be coming back in year 2 of their careers. And the Jets, they've got a bunch of picks that they got to fill in holes. And the only question is, we know how Aaron is, because Aaron He's been working a lot on himself all throughout last year's offseason, especially when he's been doing ayahuasca. But the other thing of it is, too, he's the kind that he's 39. He doesn't want to be working along with kids all the time. I mean, that was what was the toughest challenge in the season for Green Bay, right? I said it that they were going to take a step back. This was not going to be an easy season. Now, Robert Saleh, as we know, the type of coach, knows how to put his boot down, knows exactly how to get his team readied up for any opponent they come across. I mean, it's like a college atmosphere for the Jets. It's very wildly entertaining. But I just think that when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, I don't know if he could really handle. I'm not saying he can't handle New York media because think about it. He's been in a small town market in Green Bay for years. He's known how to work this thing. But as far as the high expectation, not to mention all the young kids he's dealing around with him, I just don't know if it is a proper fit. Most people would say, well, what about Jimmy Garoppolo? I think he'd be perfect. The only thing is, the Jets got to fix up this offensive line. But Kai Becton's been hurt way too much. So they're going to have to fix that tackle position. But everywhere around, the Jets are really not that far from being competitive. We just watched the Patriots look disastrous this season. Now they hired Bill O'Brien, an offensive coordinator, instead of hiring a defensive guy to play offensive calls. Now Mac Jones can feel comfortable. The Dolphins right now have a quarterback scenario because who knows what's going to happen with Tua Tagovailoa. But Mike McDaniel's a really good offensive-minded coach. And then we just saw the Bills get unraveled by Cincinnati in the playoffs. And they still have not fixed that offensive line. So you got to ask yourself if you're the Jets, because would you rather swallow up that massive amount of money that Aaron Rodgers really is worth? Or would you possibly go and fix the offensive line, get a veteran quarterback in that room like Jimmy Garoppolo, and possibly get somebody to develop? Now, I know Jimmy's going to want a starting job, but at least he's an ideal candidate that could, at the very least, build the young quarterback, get this offense right. And Saleh knows him. Saleh's been familiar with his game since they went to the Super Bowl in San Francisco. So he knows how Jimmy could work. But I just think that the expectations and how high they are with the Jets, they're trying to get out of this abysmal hole that they've been in for the last few years. But they look like they're a lot closer than people think. But I just don't think that because Nathaniel Hackett is there as an offensive coordinator, I don't think he would have been my ideal candidate, but he's there. I don't think that's the reason that Aaron Rodgers would possibly go to the Jets. They tried this with Denver, and that didn't work out, did it? So I don't see it possibly happening a second time throughout this offseason. All right, so he covers everything Arizona Cardinals and is a part of the Locked On Network. And so locking in on Arizona Cardinals, joining us, Alex Clancy via the Global Satellite Network presented by StreamYard. All right, we got ourselves an interesting offseason with the Cardinals. I'm really, really curious as to how they're going to manage with obviously with what this whole last season looked like. In my opinion, they looked really lax under Cliff Kingsbury. And I think personally, I think it's time that they need to get an alpha in the room. And I'm almost leaning towards a possibility of Brian Flores. How do you kind of see this offseason happening with the Cardinals? And what are the ideal moves that they're going to need to make to possibly bounce back in this division?
Yeah, they need a hard reset. Over the last 4 seasons with Cliff Kingsbury and the last 10 years with Steve Keim. This is a brand new ushering in of the Arizona Cardinals in name only. They hired outside the organization for GM, which was a huge move, a huge step in the right direction for Michael Bidwell. My hierarchy for head coach hires or head coach prospects that started right when we found out Cliff Kingsbury was officially getting fired. Number 1 is DeMeco Ryans, defensive coordinator for the 49ers. I know now it looks to be an outside shot, but because I think that he's linked to the Texans job a lot more strongly with more strength than over the last couple of weeks, which makes sense. Get him out of the NFC. It's a win for the Cardinals regardless. Sean Payton now seems to be the apple of everybody's eye after spending 7.5 hours with Michael Bidwell and Monty Ossenford a couple days ago. And Brian Flores, the whole idea is anybody they choose out of this pool before Dan Quinn went back to Denver and before Frank Reich took the Carolina job, it all would be a step forward from where they were for 4 years. So that's something that needs to be like appreciated and understood, that Michael Bidwell is really trying to do things in a complete 180 fashion from what he's done pretty much during the entire tenure that he took over, the reins of the Cardinals from his dad who passed away.
Yeah, and I know that this franchise, and I know that there's been a ton of history of to where they haven't had great seasons, at least not until they had Kurt Warner and then they had everybody on that offense. I loved watching that team win Super Bowl 43. I mean, it was a team that shook everybody in the NFC, but to get themselves back to that style and level of play, it's going to take a little bit to where they need to fix the right pieces. They need to get the same flow of offense happening, and the defense has to be shut down. I mean, I can't begin to tell you how many times they've had a couple of coughed up plays. Then it's cost them a lot of that momentum. And you can either agree or disagree, but I've felt like in the last few years with the Cardinals, dating back to when Steve Wilkes was the head coach, they haven't been able to fix their offensive line. I loved the addition of Rodney Hudson. I thought, okay, this is going to probably boost a little bit to fix it. But since they even had Josh Rosen as a quarterback and you have Kyler Murray, the offensive line looked atrocious. They're still running for their lives out of the pocket. And then on top of all of that, I'm not seeing much of the production up on the defense. So it just kind of feels like they need to find that balance somewhere in between, right?
Yeah, the offensive line, Rodney Hudson was mulling retirement. He had an unexcused absence from mandatory minicamp. People thought he was going to retire. He came back, cashed in, played 4 or 5 games, and was hurt the rest of the year. So that was kind of the final, swan song you'd think from Rodney Hudson in his career. Just he got about $10 million richer. The offensive line was decimated with injury last year. But yeah, I mean, I was pounding the table. What I wanted to happen in the draft that would have leveled up the Cardinals roster from, a pretty successful 2021, aside from, the last 5 or 7 games in the playoff game, was offensive line, pass rush, and corner. And Steve Keim decided to trade for wide receiver and draft a tight end in the second round, which, it's, I say the Arizona Cardinals are the definition of insanity, doing the same things, expecting different results. Regarding the defense, that was kind of a sticking point for me all year, because if you look at after the 2021 season ended, every major move was made to benefit the offense. Trading for Hollywood Brown, extending Cliff Kingsbury, drafting Trey McBride. Everything was done to bolster the offense, and losing Chandler Jones, which ended up being, fine. Jordan Hicks playing meaningful snaps in Minnesota, veteran leadership. The Arizona Cardinals defense was shunned this offseason. They were ignored this offseason. And then going into 2022, it's like, well, okay, the defense's job is to set the table for the offense so the offense can eat, and the offense was fasting all year. The defense wasn't set to win games. They were set to set up the offense to take care of business, and the offense did the antithesis of that. So that's why they give us so many points. They weren't built. They don't have the talent. That's not on Vince Joseph. They do not have the talent to withstand the rigors playing against all of these offenses in 2022. It just wasn't built that way.
Yeah, and I mean, and there was a bunch of struggles too, because and maybe you might have evaluated this as well, because I think with Kyler Murray, I know the biggest thing that I said going into the new season was, first of all, you got a massive contract extension. There's going to be a lot of heat that's on your shoulders, and that happens with a lot of quarterbacks who get big time money. Now, I do say it is an offensive centric league, and the quarterback, you want to give him as much pieces as possible. You got to protect him at all costs. And you got to get him the right personnel that's going to trust in his abilities in order for him to move the offense. How did you evaluate Kyler Murray all throughout this season? And are there some adjustments that he's going to need to make? Because I know the biggest argument was he completely focused? Was he the kind that, he felt like he was invested in this offense? There's been a lot of question marks as to how his performance was throughout the season.
Yeah, I think how invested he was is it's lazy. The whole homework clause, that's a huge faux pas on Michael Bidwell's part. You could have sat him down on the couch and be like, dude, what are we doing here? I'm going to give you all this money. You're going to watch some more film and it'll be fine. And I would have respected Michael Bidwell a lot more if he didn't rescind it, which just showed, him backtracking. It's like, okay, if you're going to be a jerk and do that and have it leak and all that stuff. Keep it at least. Have a backbone. But I think that was the last bad move that Michael Bidwell has made up until this point. Kyler Murray, he didn't take the leap that everybody thought he was in year 4. Because he's had kind of the same journey as Josh Allen. I compare them a lot on the podcast, even though they're not, Josh Allen's almost a foot taller than, it should, like, stature-wise, they're not the same. But Josh Allen really struggled his first year and a half, like really struggled. And Kyler Murray came out, played a lot better than Josh Allen did in his first year and a half. And then year 3 was the year Kyler Murray popped, and they didn't follow through. And then last year was just a sham. It was kind of like let's shake this Etch-a-Sketch and start over. My biggest thing with Kyler Murray, and he's not absolved of all blame and necessity to get better, but he's doing this by himself. Like when Jared Goff was with the Rams for a while, Sean McVay got all the credit for Jared Goff. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I used to say was Jared Goff wins because of Sean McVay, and Kyler Murray wins in spite of Cliff Kingsbury. And I feel like that's what it's been. So with the inability of Cliff Kingsbury to elevate and coach the one player he was brought in to coach and elevate, I feel like bringing in an adult, bringing in somebody with some status, bringing in somebody with some history of winning football, because Cliff Kingsbury never won anywhere he went, ever, before coming to the NFL. It will do immeasurable, it'll have immeasurable benefits for Kyler Murray. And we're going to find out. Band-Aid's going to be ripped off for Kyler Murray in 2023.
Yeah, and you got to think that's got to be a rough stain to get off of for Cliff Kingsbury, because he didn't have any success in Texas A&M, and he had Patrick Mahomes, and then comes into the NFL, and he has Kyler Murray, who's a fantastic talent out of Oklahoma, and you couldn't do anything from there. I mean, yeah, you had one winning season, but after that, you couldn't build upon it. You couldn't keep the consistency. So, yeah, that's got to be a rough stain for Cliff Kingsbury. I feel like that. I don't know. I feel like that if he could, he probably would go into an offensive coordinating position, or maybe he might end up trying to reset and keep, and start back up in college somewhere that they may need a reshape of the program, but we don't know. I mean, there's several questions about him, but in the end, I mean, yeah, the Cardinals need something new. So what's the latest status as far as DeAndre Hopkins is concerned? I know that has been a topic where, is Hopkins going to be leaving out of Arizona? I felt like that if this is the move, Arizona was going to be good with, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there were a couple games when I watched Kyler Murray without DeAndre Hopkins, and it looked like he was kind of lost from there. Didn't have his big time target. The offense didn't really play the same. Now, I will say I like Rondale Moore, and I do like Hollywood Brown in a couple of those pieces. I think you could build something off that. But I think at this point, if they're going to be moving because they got to get something new in the building and really reshape this organization, I feel like if they make this move, you got to be acquiring some picks. And could that potentially be Arizona's going to get some more real good weapons maybe come into the draft?
I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is still elite, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
I don't understand the disdain of, oh, well, you're going to have to extend him and he's 31. The dude isn't fast. He's never been fast. So when he gets older, he's not going to have to change his game because speed was his weapon. Tyreek Hill's not going to be Tyreek Hill when he's 33. He's going to be slower. Like, DeAndre Hopkins runs with cinder blocks on his feet, but he always seems to get where he needs to go. He catches everything. I'm in the camp that they need to figure out, especially if Sean Payton becomes the head coach, they need to figure out how to extend him and have him retire an Arizona Cardinal. One of my biggest fears going into 2022 with him being on the shelf with the PED suspension for the first 6 weeks was the Cardinals treading water and staying afloat, because I saw that if DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown didn't play meaningful snaps together in 2022, that means that DeAndre Hopkins would be gone. And that's exactly what happened. Like, after 6 weeks, DeAndre Hopkins comes back. Hollywood Brown gets hurt in the last game before DeAndre Hopkins is set to return. We haven't seen two of the better receivers in the NFL on the same field at the same time. And that's something that there are no optics for now, or no optics on now, which makes it easier to potentially trade him. The wrinkle is, if Mickey Loomis wants a first-round pick in 2023 as part of the package for the New Orleans Saints, for Sean Payton, which I think is absolutely absurd. There are teams some of them still in the playoffs. I mean, namely Kansas City, that would happily trade their late first round pick for DeAndre Hopkins to be the last piece of their offensive puzzle. And the Cardinals can parlay that pick into trading to the Saints for Sean Payton. But if I'm Sean Payton, I want DeAndre Hopkins on the field. I want him as part of this offense. People don't understand how incredibly valuable he still is. He put up massive numbers when he came back. Massive numbers. 10 plus catches, over 100 yards, touchdown. Like, he's still DeAndre Hopkins. So they need to figure out a way to make it cap friendly and have him retire in Arizona Cardinal, in my humblest of opinions. But if they do move him, I think it would be as a piece to acquire a pick to parlay over to New Orleans for Sean Payton.
Yeah, and you got to think too, because this is an organization in the last couple of years, they've had a pedigree of real good wide receivers. I mean, Anquan Bolden, Larry Fitzgerald, and then you bring in DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown. I mean, it ain't like they don't lack on offensive receivers, because these guys are going to be built up, they're going to be working well with it, and then it becomes now shaped to where this is a really elite offense. So this draft is going to be really interesting, because I just see this to where, and I said this in my show several times, I'll talk more about it, but we always every year get either 3 or 4 quarterbacks in this league where 2 or 3 of them are going to be big hits, and there's always one that's going to be bound to be a bust. I mean, we watched in the 2020 draft. I mean, that was a great draft. We saw a little more of the truths about Tua Tagovailoa being, challenged as a left-handed, but yet at his size, I'm a little bit, worried about his health. And then the past draft where we had Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson was clearly a bust. And Trevor Lawrence, obviously going into the playoffs, looked like a number 1 pick. But these 4 quarterbacks, as far as evaluating, I feel like if 3 of those 4, if they're in the right situations, I'm feeling like Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, and possibly Bryce Young, because I feel like CJ Stroud, we just got the best of him during the bowl game he played at. But usually when those quarterbacks come in, there's always one that's kind of bound to be challenged if he's not in the right position, right?
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, like, what I don't understand is, why is Bryce Young looked at as Bryce Young's smaller than Kyler Murray? Like, yeah. I don't know why it's just that people are just like, oh, he went to Alabama, so he's frail compared to Kyler Murray. He's young and he'll grow in his body. CJ Stroud's 6'3". Will Levis, Will Levis is like a social media darling, because everybody's seen the videos of him just slinging it. Mm-hmm. It's just like a cannon shot out of his arm with really tight spiral and really effortless motion, over the top throw. Like, that's why people know who Will Levis is. It's because of the viral videos of him just ripping it. Zach Wilson could do that too. That's what got Zach Wilson drafted, was that throw at the combine. That one throw got him drafted number 2 overall, which is insane to me. I don't think there's any quarterbacks here that I would 100% trade the farm for, but look what San Francisco did with Trey Lance 2 years ago.
Yeah,
like it's about potential. Now it's about getting your guy, and it'll be interesting to see. And I don't know if this will happen or not, but is there going to be a Brock Purdy effect where it's like not necessarily at the top, but it's like, you know what? Let's save our 4th round pick, draft a linebacker, draft an offensive lineman, and see if we can get a quarterback in the 6th round. See if we can strike gold. Brock Purdy's making $77,000 guaranteed in his entire contract. If they win the Super Bowl, he'll make double that. So, like, it's just, I don't know what the quarterback market's going to be. This year, it seems like it's kind of forcing it. But we'll see. I mean, it's going to benefit the Arizona Cardinals because they're going to have the ability, most likely, to draft the best non-quarterback player at 3 overall.
Yeah, and so I think about that too, because the Cardinals are in a comfortable position in the draft, because now there are a bunch of positions that need to be addressed. Obviously, JJ Watt retiring, they're going to probably look for an edge rusher. I think too they got to at the very least upgrade that D line, because you got to have somebody who's going to be a run disruptor and somebody that's going to at the very least force pressure on opposing offenses. Because I'll tell you what, I do like Isaiah Simmons and I do like Budda Baker, but I do feel like at times, and I know that this was kind of an effect after Patrick Peterson left, that the secondaries, they got to be shut down. They really, because especially when you're facing a San Francisco offense with Brandon Ayuk and several of them. They got some speed. You got to have guys that are well capable of doing man-to-man coverage and even, cover twos or threes. And so, this has got to be an interesting spot for the Cardinals, but where do you see them as far as their draft needs and who you are possibly eyeballing that you evaluated that you think would be a perfect fit for the Cardinals moving into this organization?
Yeah, they finally have a full slate of picks. Steve Keim's not making them, which is fantastic. I think Will Anderson's the pick, edge rusher, and I think because edge rusher is such a premium position that you're going to pay, like, so say he hits, you get 4 years of inexpensive employment from a guy that's going to end up making whatever it is at that point, 80 million guaranteed, 120 million guaranteed. We don't know what the pay scale would be then. Jalen Carter's the other guy from Georgia that runs stuff from Georgia. He's an absolute machine. But the Cardinals it's going to take 2 drafts and 2 off seasons to build this roster. Well, what I equated to, the metaphor that I use, or the analogy that I use, is, when you're younger and you have one of your best friends comes over and you guys, play with your toys when you're 5 and 6 years old, and your best friend gets picked up and he doesn't help you pick up your toys and it's just a mess everywhere. That's what Steve Keim left this organization as. So it's going to take a draft, an offseason of nailing both to a T. Dictionary definition of you hit on 80% of your high picks 2 years in a row. And the Cardinals will go from the shambles that they're in now to, especially if Kyler Murray takes a step forward with the new head coach, to a force to be reckoned with. It doesn't take very much time. It takes 18 months to really turn something around if drafted and free agent brought properly. But, in the beginning, like, what they didn't do, it should have been Tyler Linderbaum at 23 overall last year. They would have had their all-pro center for the next 15 years.
Yeah.
It should have been Drake Jackson, edge rusher from USC in the second round, or trading up to draft David Ajabo because they had a third-round pick extra for trading for Hollywood Brown. They could have moved up and got a guy of impact at the edge rush position. They didn't. They drafted a tight end. So now they're even further behind the 8 ball. So it's edge rusher, it's offensive line, it's corner, it's interior defensive line. It's everything. So it's really, like, luckily, again, there's going to be a couple quarterbacks up top that you'd hope that for the Cardinals, that Indy's going to move up to number 1. For Chicago will bounce back to 4. It'll go quarterback with Indy and Houston, and the Cardinals will draft Jalen Carter or Will Anderson. It's a win either way. But I think Will Anderson should be the guy because of how I think the Cardinals leading sack getter. I think it was J.J. Watt had a bunch of sacks, but, like, from a pass rusher perspective, I think it was around 5 was the lead pass rusher last year with sacks. They need it immediately. You could sign. It's a lot easier to sign veteran corner talent than freakishly talented edge rushers who are 22 years old, and that's why you get the inexpensive talent to the draft.
Yeah, and I completely agree because the younger that edge rushing position, good God, we watch Micah Parsons all the time.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's a hybrid player and is just hyper athletic, he's getting to the quarterback and he's stopping the run too. So yeah, I agree with you. Having that position being younger because they got fresh legs, they obviously have that attacking instinct where they're just there to disrupt the opposing offense and really put pressure on it, especially in a division where you got Kyle Shanahan and that remarkable offense he has in San Francisco. And then you got the Rams. We know they took a bounce back this year, but they're shaping right now to where they're trying to reload and still be competitive within this division. And then the Seahawks, out of nowhere, they just started. There was so much heckles on them, and then they finished the way they did. And I'm like, that's where I'm like, all that high heat is on the Cardinals now because you watched from the entirety of the season. The Seahawks made huge, interesting moves. They looked like it didn't matter whether Russell Wilson was going to stay or not. They were still going to stay the same. And now they're so much younger and there's so much young talent there that they're bound for something special. And then there's the Rams and then the Niners. So I think the biggest objective, because you got to get somebody in that's willing to go toe-to-toe with Pete Carroll, with Kyle Shanahan, and with Sean McVay, because Clint Kingsbury was just getting knocked around everywhere from all 3 of these coaches. And then having the offense and, of course, the defense to disrupting everybody within this division. So that's where I'm like, yeah, a lot of this high heat, there is no way possible that the Arizona Cardinals could possibly ruin up this draft, right? And they've got to be able to do this within the 2 years.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how the Cardinals are, but I'm excited for it. I mean, ultimately, they got to get the right people, they got to get the right personnel, and hopefully, this will be something to where Kyler Murray, he's enjoying this, he looks invested in, and this offense could start to thrive, and the defense could start to support the offense to getting the points up there. Well, Alex, I appreciate you coming on by. Where could everybody find you as far as Cardinals content and everything they need to know coming into this upcoming offseason in the draft?
You can follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. The YouTube channel Locked on Arizona Cardinals. Yeah, and free and available wherever you get your podcast.
All righty. Well, I appreciate your time up on here, Alex. Have a great rest of your weekend. And let me get your picks for this weekend. Who are you kind of feeling that are going to be out on top to get to Super Bowl 57?
I'm taking the Eagles and the Chiefs. Cincinnati is given the best quarterback in the NFL a lot of bulletin board material over the last week. So I feel like regardless of the roster that the Chiefs have compared to past years, regardless of how potent the Bengals offense is, I'm taking Patty and Jalen Hurts. Like Jalen Hurts has really emerged as potential powerhouse in this league for a long time. A dude that couldn't throw a football really when he was at Alabama. It's a wild transformation from what we've seen. I don't think the 49ers defense is good enough to withstand both sides of the football that Philly can bring at him.
Well, and you got to think too, Brock Purdy is facing against a tough elite defense. So this will be the first time we'll see him getting that tested to where I don't know. I feel this game going close, but yeah, I completely feel you on that game. But it will be interesting with Kansas City and Cincinnati.
Yeah,
all righty, Alex, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we will definitely see you soon.
Likewise. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is an interesting offseason for the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, Kyler Murray, my only big thing was, and I knew this when going into the season, is that the offense was going to be completely different. The contract extension was going to be pressurizing. Cliff Kingsbury could not afford to fail because after having a winning season that year where they made it into the playoffs, they got completely undressed by the Rams. And I mean, that there was the indication that was not going to look good for the next season. So there's so many things that they have to address. The head coach, the offense needs to be addressed. The defense has to be addressed. But I agree with Alex wholeheartedly because they at the very least need to get that speedster disruptor on the defense. And they also got to protect Kyler Murray because this is about that point. Even though, yes, he runs with his legs and he has a real good winning record when he runs. But most people that know that even though that they utilize their legs a lot, if they're running majority of the time and they're running for their life, that year span is going to come down very shortly. And I mean, look at what happened with Buffalo. I mean, Josh Allen, he's running because the offense can't get the run game going. So he has to be super reliant to get the offense to move. And that's not the way you want to go about the offense. And Kyler Murray's small. Now, we know that he's very elusive and he's very efficient. Plus, he does throw a beautiful deep ball. He is capable of making the throws. But they got to really fix up that offensive line. That's why I was like, this line looked so atrocious. He's still running for his life. They haven't figured this out since 2019. And it looked absolutely atrocious. So that's why, with everything that's happened, Seahawks played better. The 49ers are elite. And the Rams, they took a step back, but still, I mean, you can't count out Sean McVay. And so that's why the Cardinals are in the position that they are in now. And they've got to be able to revamp. They got to be able to stay competitive and at the very least shoot for the playoffs, hopefully by next year. But I have a feeling, I think Brian Flores would work with this because at least he shaped this defense within a year. And if you looked at Miami, I could care less exactly how it started, but if you watched a lot of his numbers and the defense and how they played that year when they went from 1-7 to being 8-8, they were on fire. They started figuring a lot of those things out. The defense was giving them a real good shot to where the offense can now start to produce. And Brian Flores, people could say what they want to about him, but at the very least, he's smart enough to where he's capable of shaping this offense. Plus, he's getting Kyler Murray where he's going to put his foot down and say, we've got to move this offense. We have got to be able to make the plays. I feel like, though, because with this possibility of DeAndre Hopkins, whether he stays or leaves, I mean, he's still an elite receiver, still is able to make the unbelievable catches, especially with his height and with his ball control as well, because he's still elite. Even at his age, he's still elite. But you can't burn through time at the very least to hoping that this offense will move. I mean, that's why this offseason, I mean, the Bidwells, they got to get this right. I and that's why I'm like, even with the general managing, let him figure out a lot of those things. He's going to get the right person in the room. And you got to hope that this is one that they're definitely going to move. All right. So I did want to talk about this. I think this one's going to be really, really interesting coming to the off season for this next year. So we've got one elite quarterback who is still in the playoffs, in the championship against the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's Joe Burrow. So looking at the splits between both these quarterbacks from the 2020 draft, Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. Now, Jalen Hurts, because he was a second-round quarterback, he might get at least a little bit of a break, but we know how elite that he has been because he's been working on his game year after year after year. Tua's is a different situation because of not only just the amount of play time, but his health status, a little bit of his accuracy, because there were tendencies where he either underthrew or overthrew a lot of his receivers. So, and we know he's a guy that doesn't like to make mistakes. But the two quarterbacks that I focus on because of the offseason will be Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. Both these quarterbacks, if you look at the splits, so both these quarterbacks are such elite quarterbacks in several ways. Why? Because both of them are capable of throwing the deep ball. They have such great control. The difference is that Cincinnati has a real good pedigree when it comes to their offense. They got Tyler Boyd, they got Jamar Chase, they got T. Higgins, all within their early and late 20s. And these guys are going to be bound for big time seasons. And Jamar Chase is so young that he is capable and is going to be bound to be a fantastic wide receiver. Now, the other part is the defense was better with Cincinnati. They were a great second half defense. That's why I'm like, when we put our prime predictions up here in the bottom half of the hour, there's going to be a few things I will touch upon. But my biggest thing with the Bengals is because is it going to be time? Now, if the Bengals win tomorrow, can we finally, at the very least, give some credit to Zach Taylor? I interviewed him years ago, a year ago, when they were in the Super Bowl last year against the Rams. And I thought, he's very smart. He really works along with this offense. And by the way, people are not thinking about the year when they first drafted Joe Burrow and what the record was from that position. What they were focused on is what happened last year and where we are this year. And he's actually got a much better record. And out of Sean McVay's tree, where he's pro offense, Joe Burrow is absolutely comfortable in this. And he does exactly what Joe Burrow does. Stays calm, stays cool in the pocket, throws a beautiful deep ball, and not to mention very much a lot of accuracy coming off that arm. Throws it for a lot of accuracy. And he really does build along with this offense. That's why I think they found that identity to where they crush it in the running game, because Joe Mixon he's pounding through a lot of opposing defensive lines. So that to me feels like that the Bengals have a very balanced offense. Now, in this position, because with Justin Herbert, the problem of it is with the Chargers, is that we all just are very skeptical about the head coach. Now, we know offensive coordinator, they needed to get rid of Joe Lombardi. I mean, it was about that time. Playing too many out routes, too many dink and dunks, and you're not playing to Justin Herbert's strength. He's not a short passer. Those are the kinds of plays that you would call for Daniel Jones and for Dak Prescott and for Kirk Cousins. This is not the type of talent that you're dealing with. You're dealing with somebody who's capable of throwing the deep ball. He's accurate when he does it, and he's just that kind of born leader. He may not talk a whole lot, but he shows it a lot on the field. Now, everybody is like, "Oh, Justin Herbert's overrated. He doesn't really look his best." I said, "But here's the thing. Ask yourself, if you were behind closed doors and you were literally dealing with the staff and with the coach, with all the personnel, wouldn't you feel the utmost for Justin Herbert? Because anybody ever watched that game against Miami? And you know how many times that he was running the football? He was throwing accurate passes. He looked comfortable of where he was at. That wasn't Joe Lombardi. That was more of Justin Herbert taking control of the offense, which is what they need to let him do. They need to let him control the offense. I'm telling you, when the offensive coordinator comes in, and there are several big time names. Zach Robinson, they said he's a strong candidate for this position. Joe Brady, Greg Olson. There's so many different offensive coordinators that are there. Now there are some of them. I don't know if I really feel as comfortable or feel as amped up about them, because I think it's ultimately, and they even said it too, Justin Herbert will be in that room when it comes to interviewing these offensive coordinators and how they click, because they've got to match to his strengths. They've got to really know how to move the football down. And I think Brandon Staley, in the end of it, he's got to heavily focus on that defense. If you get an offensive coordinator who's been through this, who knows exactly how to shape that offense, you have a trust. That's why I said, find one that's a Shane Steichen like type of coordinator, because you see what's happening with the Eagles. Jalen Hurts looks fantastic. The offense looks complete. So if you can find that offensive coordinator that knows how to move this offense and also really works to Justin Herbert's strengths, this, I think, would be the best possible way for Justin Herbert to grow. Now, with that being said, both these quarterbacks up into their splits. Joe Burrow has obviously been to a Super Bowl, and he's won an AFC title game. The other thing is, he's taken a very irrelevant franchise like the Bengals and have turned them into an elite franchise, because now they've got a lot of young players from both offensive and defensively. And Zach Taylor, I feel like, needs to earn a lot of that credit as well, because of the fact of he's calling up a lot of the plays. He's not shook. He's also like real smart when it comes to when you got to get a first down, you got to play the right plays situationally to at the very least get your team momentum. And the second half defense is insane. They are big time stoppers in the second half. So Joe Burrow would be bound for potentially a $50 million a year contract. Now, we know, watching Patrick Mahomes, because he has a Super Bowl, he's on his 5th straight AFC title game hosted in Kansas City. That contract speaks for itself. I can understand it. But I also know too that when it comes to the Chiefs, they're 2-3 in those 5 games. So it is well, they're 2-2 as of right now. So they're in the 5th time. Now, I know it's pressurizing, because it's never easy to get to the Super Bowl, let alone win it. There's a lot of things that go into play. But I think with Joe Burrow, he would be very capable of a contract like that. Now, it's up to Cincinnati whether or not that they're willing to break bank, but you got to think of the breaks they're getting. They're getting a break with Jamar Chase, but eventually he's going to want a contract extension. They're getting a bunch of these receivers as well that are inexpensive, and they play to like B plus A rated. And Joe Mixon, He's obviously got, I think he's got his extension already, but he's one that he's going to be a real, real good piece that complements it with the run game. And the other thing is, too, you don't want to take a massive hit on the defense because the defense, they're going to do whatever it takes to keep themselves afloat. Now, I know a lot of the conversation is what's going to happen with Jesse Bates because I know that he's part of this defense and he's really worked it well. But I think ultimately that if you're Joe Burrow, now we've watched Tom Brady do this. We've watched a bunch of quarterbacks do this. Some quarterbacks, they're probably going to want to end up making the most money because you watch Kyler Murray. But here's the thing. Cardinals are a mess. So Kyler Murray's getting paid the high money. Cardinals missed the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers, he got the highest money. Packers missed the playoffs. Kirk Cousins. Now, I remember when he ended up getting the high paid and then was not the same. Vikings missed the playoffs. Now, they made it this year. Now, I don't think they're going to end up winning 11 straight once again. I love Kevin O'Connell, but I don't think that Vikings, because of the way that the defense is playing and how that they are really, really going to play how they're really going to end up playing with Kirk Cousins in the offense, I don't know if it'll be the same. But I do see with Joe Burrow that if he evaluates this, it'll be interesting to see whether or not if he does get a $50 million a year contract or he may end up taking slightly, but still be paid respectfully. The same thing that's going to happen with Justin Herbert. Now, in Herbert's case, here's the hard part. The Chargers know, and Tom Telesco knows, they put a lot of their chips in this year. This is why it was frustrating for Charger fans to really swallow that pill because of the fact of they put a lot of the chips in. They spent up some big time money. JC Jackson got hurt. A bunch of pieces. They were big time hits. They got hurt. And ultimately, they're trying to shed as much of the salary cap money that they could possibly get so they can finagle it because they know this is going to be the contract extension talk that's going to be made with Justin Herbert. The Chargers know they have got to do everything in their willpower to keeping Justin Herbert a Charger because they know this was the place he really wanted to be and has rooted for them for years, and to be playing in this organization. Hopefully they do this right. The last thing you want is you want to waste a talent like they wasted Dan Fouts. I'm serious. So, and you got to think, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, they're not going to be the same receivers for quite some time. They know they're very elite, but Mike Williams has been hurt. Keenan Allen has been hurt. Jalen Guyton got hurt on an ACL tear. They didn't end up making any moves or changes in the trade deadline, which is what I was really concerned with. I thought they could have gotten Denzel Mims. He wanted out of the Jets. He probably would have, and he's a young receiver. You can work with this. So now, and the Chargers are standing at 21st in that draft. Everybody is like, are they going to get? I've been hearing a lot of conversations now about them trying to get Bijan Robinson. It'll be interesting about that because it's the running back position, and they're trying to find at least the capable and consistent running back. I know, but they have Austin Eckler, but they're trying to find that secondary that could really run the football on the ground and one that could really give them some rest time. Then they got to get more receivers because you're not going to have very long with this receiving core. You have got to work with a lot of those strengths. So this will be an interesting offseason. But I do think that if knowing Justin Herbert because of how he carries himself on and off the field, I don't know if he's going to be taking a $50 million a year contract. Because I think for him, now I can't speak for Justin, but I think just by the way that he carries himself, his mindset, the way he looks at a lot of things, maybe one that might possibly take a slight pay cut just because it's reshaping this organization to where they need to be. That's ultimately what needs to happen. But both Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert are fantastic elite quarterbacks that are right there within the class of Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Trevor Lawrence and Josh Allen. So a lot of those guys, I mean, that's why Baltimore, they've got to get on this train to re-signing Lamar Jackson to the right price tag. Plus, at some point, I'll be interested to see how Jacksonville really re-signs Trevor Lawrence, because I know they made it to the playoffs. He works well with Doug Peterson. They're going to be building something elite, and Calvin Ridley comes back. So Jacksonville is going to be competitive for at least the next couple of years, but as long as they're in the right track. But I think with the $50 million a year, it'll be interesting to say the least. All right. I'm going to be talking about something right up on the bottom half of the hour. But as everybody knows, my favorite segment of all, as everybody knows, NFL Prime Predictions. We've been doing really, really well throughout the season. Now, postseason, it's taken a little bit of a slight rocky hit. But, however, I think these two games with these championships and the way we break them down, it's going to be really, really interesting. So, without further ado, my Prime Predictions Conference Championship Edition. Here we go. This is going to be fun. Let's turn it up. It's Jake's Prime Predictions. 49ers and Eagles. I'm going to take San Francisco's plus 2.5 to cover. However, this is going to be interesting to say the least, because Brock Purdy last weekend against the Dallas Cowboys, it was a bit of a challenge on both ends. But what Brock Purdy was able to do is he was able to stay calm in the pocket from the second half, and they were able to, at the very least, get the offense rolling. It was slow to begin with because they were just getting points up on the board, and then finally the 49ers came out of the gate. They started applying a lot of pressure. Brock Purdy was making the clutch throws that he's supposed to. But I feel like with this Philadelphia defense, because they absolutely steamrolled the Giants 38-7, that this Eagles team, I'm not seeing any flaws. And they're getting Maddox back. So this defense is going to be fully loaded for Philadelphia. And Brock Purdy, this is the game to determine whether or not they have the right quarterback, or they might end up continuing to evaluate. But I feel like Brock Purdy, because of the way he carries himself with his throws and with those snaps, and he looks like he's more than capable. Now, if they either win or keep this game close, or it's a close loss, San Francisco's got their guy. And they're going to end up having to talk about Jimmy Garoppolo. He'll be gone. Trey Lance, they're going to have to figure that out one way or another. But I'm going to take the Niners in the points, but Philadelphia wins at home 33-31 on the road to Super Bowl 57. Bengals at Chiefs. I know. A lot of people have been talking about how big this game is going to be, and yeah, it's massive. I'm going to take the Cincinnati Bengals +1. Now, the Chiefs in the last 3 matchups have not been good against the Bengals. That also stretches into what last season was. Now, this is what's going to be a concern for the Kansas City Chiefs. Are we sure that high ankle sprain is as good as everybody says it to be? I feel like it might be too good to be true, because the Chiefs, they are not going to end up showing off to where, Patrick Mahomes, by the way, he's hurt. He's not going to end up feeling 110%. I feel like you might get 80 to 85% of Patrick Mahomes because he's got to distribute the football. Now, the defense, however, in the last 13 postseason games for Chris Jones, 0 sacks. So he hasn't really been that disruptor. The only person who's gotten more sacks than him in his career is Frank Clark. So they're going to expect Frank Clark to be that disruptor. But Chris Jones, it's interesting. You see how he plays during the regular season and what he plays in the postseason. Now, Cincinnati last week in the snow, They completely undressed and dismantled the Buffalo Bills from their offensive line to how the offense was playing simple play throws. You're in the snow. It's sleek. It's a little slippery, but they had maintained control. Now, it's going to be cold in Arrowhead, but it's no surprise to what the Cincinnati Bengals has already been through. So I feel like the Bengals and Joe Burrow, they're going to go toe-to-toe again. Kansas City's a real good first half offense. By the way, last few times that the Bengals have faced against the Chiefs in the second half, in the fourth quarter, Bengals have had 26 points over 6 against Kansas City. That's an insane number. That's why I'm like, I think the cover on the 1 point feels a lot real to me. So I'm going to take the Bengals to win and cover. 1 point is all I need. 28, 27. It'll be an action-packed game between two of the most elite quarterbacks left in this game and in the playoffs. I think Cincinnati returns to the Super Bowl 57. Well, how about that, huh? I'm letting the dogs bark this weekend. I'm taking the Niners with the 2.5, with Philadelphia with the benefit of them winning 33-31. And then I'm taking the Bengals on the road to disrupt the Kansas City Chiefs, +1, 28-27. I just feel like that because the Bengals, they are so they are so calm. That's why I'm like, we're talking about, an elite pedigree of quarterbacks with Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, but we're not talking enough about Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow. Now, think about some of the comps of some of these quarterbacks. I think we now know a lot of those comps during the postseason. So I think, to me, Patrick Mahomes, his comp is Tom Brady. The reason I say that is because even though he has much more hyper athletic talent than what Tom Brady had when he first came in this league, but he's smart, cleaned a lot of things up, and he's got Andy Reid. Andy Reid is a smart play caller. He's a great play designer, and he really does know how to put every inch of things into perspective. Next is Joe Burrow. And I think it's clear that his comp is Joe Montana. The reason of that is because he's going into an offense that is absolutely elite. And think about it. This is a younger, like Jerry Rice and Joe Montana, complementary offense between Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. This is going to be one that's going to be elite for years. So, and Joe, he's really comfortable in the pocket, distributes a beautiful thrown football, and he knows exactly how to manage all of that. Josh Allen, his comp, I think, is Ben Roethlisberger. Big, strong. He basically carries a knockout punch. But at least with Josh Allen, we know with him running the football, he's very reliant on it. Now, Ben Roethlisberger did run the football in some cases, but they did have a run game. They had a run game all throughout the last few years he's been there. Jerome Bettis, Willie Parker, Rashad Mendenhall, Le'Veon Bell, Stephen Ridley, and of course, Najee Harris. They had a bunch of real good running backs in that pedigree with that offense. And I think that's where, if the Bills get the offensive line right, and they really start to be more efficient in the run game. It's not that they don't trust Devin Singletary or any of the rest of them. I think James Cook will be really good. But this is already that offensive line in the last 6 years have not been addressed. And then finally, you've got Justin Herbert, hey, what's going on, Purple Pocket Podcast? My good friend Wrap Up in here in the building. Justin Herbert, I feel like his comp is Peyton Manning. Why do I say that? Both these quarterbacks have been so comfortable in the pocket. What is this going to take? It's going to take them to really keeping the offensive line afloat. It's going to take the defense to be really elite. And I'll say this. I mean, they've got a really good complete package, but when you watch Justin Herbert and Peyton Manning, They both are strong in the pocket to where they're making accurate throws. I mean, you've seen it with Peyton. You've seen several times where, he calls up his audibles, even when he was in Denver and Indianapolis, but he throws BBs all the way around. Now, I think Justin's got a stronger throwing arm, maybe along the lines of like an Andrew Luck type, but at the same time, they're both comfortable up in that pocket. I think it's clear. You watch a lot of those quarterbacks, and that's why I think it'll be really interesting how things shape up for the Chargers moving forward. But I feel like that's a perfect comp. I can't, you can't dispute that. The only thing is that Trevor Lawrence, I don't even think he has a comp. I think he's just one of one. I mean, I can't think of anybody that I could literally put into that that kind of odd. Maybe, maybe he's kind of more Drew Brees like, because at the very least he can move a little more out of the pocket, slings the football, controls it to where he's got a really smart head coach in Doug Peterson, and the Jags, they've got a real good offense amongst them. And I feel like that defense with Josh Allen and of course with a few other really good pieces, that defense is going to be really, really something special. So maybe that's the comp. I think Trevor Lawrence is right there with Drew Brees. He's going to be a guy that's going to seriously make a lot of real good throws, and he's going to distribute the offense to where everybody works. So that's what I feel like. Patrick Mahomes is Tom Brady. Joe Burrow is Joe Montana. Justin Herbert is Peyton Manning. And I think Trevor Lawrence is honestly Drew Brees. That's my comp. Now, again, I'm not talking from the stat standpoint, but watch what they do. Watch what they do. That's the reason for the comp. Not the stat and the analytics part. If you watch all those quarterbacks, can't you see a little of a resemblance from that? That's why I say that. So, alrighty, folks, that's going to do it here for me on the Snake Sports Talk Show. I appreciate everybody who has been able to come on today, and we'll be live tomorrow. I want to thank Alex Clancy from Locked On Cardinals and Clancy's Corner as well for joining us, talking Arizona Cardinals and chopping it up for the offseason. I appreciate everybody joining me today. Remember, like, follow, subscribe, and hit the bell button for all latest notifications on the Snake Sports Talk Show to keep you up to date on future and past shows. Tomorrow, we got a Baltimore Ravens content creator known as Engraven Bids is going to be joining me. Engraven will be here with us, and we'll be talking a lot about Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. So we'll see you guys tomorrow on the next edition of the Snake Sports Talk Show. Have a great day. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we will see you guys real soon tomorrow on the Snake Sports Talk Show.